Hey guys, it's Ryan here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have for you a video recommending some of my favorite paranormal or fantasy romances. So let's get on in because I actually have more than what I planned. So the first one I'm going to talk about is one that I was back and forth on whether or not I even wanted to recommend this series, because while it is one of my favorite series of all time, it starts off very much paranormal fantasy type thing and it eventually leads to a romance, but you don't get points of that romance until 2 or 3 books into the series. And so I know for some people that's a deal breaker, and for me it didn't end up being a deal breaker because I started off on the 3rd book, so it wasn't that big of a deal for me. But there are romance aspects in it, but it doesn't take place in the 1st book, like hardly at all. And I should probably tell you what this book is. So anyway, that is the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. This series follows Michaela Lane, who recently her sister has died. Her sister moved to Dublin to go to college, and she gets a message from her sister after her death telling her that someone was after her and telling Mac to stay away. And so she takes it upon herself to figure out who murdered her sister. And the series has a lot of other twists and turns after that. That's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg here, where Mac is finding out about what her sister was really like, who she is as a person, where does she come from, why these people were after her sister. It's a lot of different layers to this storyline. And like I said, I know for some people, like, not an immediate romance is a deal breaker, so I was very reluctant to recommend this, but I do love this series. It is one of my favorites of all time, and I want other people to read it. I know a lot of people enjoy the series as well, but I don't know if you should necessarily go into it for the romance, because you won't get a lot of that in the beginning. So it's hard for me to say that because I love it so much and I know how good it is, but just keep that in mind whenever you might pick this. So the next series I have now, Be Kind to Me, because this is my very worn copy of this book, but the next series I have is the Demonica series by Larissa Ion. Now this one I started back in high school. I don't even know when the first one came out because I actually didn't start on the first one. I started on the second one because it took me a very long time to even find the first one. But the original series follows a group of Seminist demon brothers, and Seminist demons are pretty much like Incubus, and they rely on sex to survive. And it's about each of these brothers finding the person that they'll spend the rest of their life with, their mate, and they have a lot of speed bumps along the way, a lot of political drama. This one, the first one, follows Edelon, who is a demon doctor, and he owns a demon hospital. And he stumbles across a demon slayer named Tila, who has some mysteries in her past that maybe she didn't know about, and they kind of hit it off from there. It's almost like enemies to lovers. But this definitely wasn't my favorite one. My favorite one is Passion Unleashed, which is Race book, but it is a really good series and you should pick it up. So the next series that I'm going to recommend is the Offspring series by Jamie Rush. Now this series follows a group of kids who their parents all died mysteriously, but they were paid by the government. Years pass and these kids start to realize as adults that they're being followed, that they have powers. They each have gifts that they didn't necessarily realize until they got older. And it's so much more complicated than that, but I don't want to give too much away because it's a whole thing. But this one follows Amy, who I believe she can see auras, if I remember correctly, and a guy named Lucas who has been visiting her in her dreams. And then one night she wakes up in the middle of the night and Lucas is standing over her bed and he tells her, "You can't trust anyone, don't trust anyone, go find my friends and they will tell you who you really are." And the story kind of takes off from there. It is so good. I loved it so much. I misplaced the series somewhere around my house and then I had to go back and rebuy all of the books, but I still loved this whole series and you should pick it up. I promise. It is so good. If you have a whole thing for government conspiracies, you will love this series because it is all about the government conspiracies. So the next one I have is one of my oldest books that I have, well, that I've read, I should say rather, not that I have, because I actually didn't own it in print until last year. And that was mainly because it took me a long time to find the original cover and not the new covers, because she's since recovered them and got with a whole new publisher because this one closed down, but I'm rambling. Anyway, that is Without Reservations by J.L. Langley, and this is for her With or Without series, and I love this series. And now I'm kind of frustrated because the next book is two characters that I really, really want her to write the book for, and it's taking her a very long time to write them. And I do understand it's because she had to switch over publishers and all this other stuff. But anyway, so this series is a male, and it follows shifters, wolf shifters. So in this world, only men can become shifters. So they go and they may find their mate, and their mate may be a woman, but she can't shift. Only men can shift. This first one follows Che, who is a veterinarian, and Keaton, who is a professor, a college professor. And Che is your super sweet cinnamon roll teddy bear character, and Keaton is super sassy, and he is used to people kind of picking on him and picking at him, even his family. So he is very reluctant to trust anyone, including Che, even though he can tell Che is his mate. Also, Che has never been with a man before. He's only been with women, so there is that as well. And it's them kind of coming to terms with that with the people in their life, coming to terms with the fact that Che might be gay, even though Keaton has always known he's gay. It's a whole thing, but I really love it. It's one of my favorite series, like I said, of all time. You'll hear that a lot here, because these are literally some of my favorite series. But I really love this. I really love the writing. It's not super long, but the story itself is just fantastic for me. I feel like I'm airing out all my dirty laundry, because you'll see some of these books are mass market paperbacks and they are so beat up, because they're some of my oldest books that I own and ones that I've reread multiple times. But anyway, so next I have the Youre Saving by Christine Warren, which is one of the books in the other series. And this one, well, the other series follows different groups of paranormal creatures. So you have vampires, you have werewolves, you have demons, you have shifters, like lion shifters and that kind of thing. Which I do have other ones. I probably should have gotten a nicer looking one, but this is the first one that I ever owned. So I thought I'd show this one to you. So this one's Youre Saving, and it follows Ava, who is this super sassy fashionista, and she is used to not taking crap from anyone, but as she's walking one night, she gets attacked by a vampire, and another vampire stumbles upon them and saves her, and that vampire is Dima, and Dima is a Russian vampire who has been sent to the United States to track down this fugitive vampire by his counsel, and he doesn't plan on making a new vampire with Ava. He doesn't plan on sticking around that long, for that matter, but something kind of pulls him to her and they start a relationship. Now, Ava is very headstrong. She doesn't like to listen to him at all, and it causes her a lot of problems in the end, which can easily make you frustrated with her. But I do love the fact that she does break down and she does let him in, and she kind of realizes that all these people in her life truly love her. They're actually there for her, and she just needs to kind of let them in a little bit more. And I enjoyed that aspect of the story. It's also really funny and it keeps me on my toes. I enjoyed also the, not just like the emotional, because there's a lot of emotional aspects in this and a lot of found family, as well as learning about appreciating the family that you have. It's a lot going into this, but I really loved it. It kept me laughing throughout the whole book because the banter in here is so funny, but there is that. And you can read these out of order. It'll probably be better if you did read it out of order, but you can read them out of order because, like I said, this is the first one I read, and this is definitely not the first book in the series. So next I have one that I haven't read in a very long time. But it's still really good. I haven't read it in a very long time because it's a very vast series now, but I digress. And that is The Edge of Hunger, which is the Primal Instinct series by Rhiannon Bird. And this one is a little bit more complicated to explain. Basically, it follows a guy named Ian who, when he was younger, he kind of ran away from home and never looked back. And he ends up in this small town in Colorado, and one day he's at home and he is approached by this woman named Molly, and Molly comes and she tells him she's had a vision. She's talked to his mother. She tells him that the Cassis are coming and that he needs to be ready, and he thinks she's crazy, she's out of her mind, he doesn't understand what she's talking about. And to explain a little bit more, his mother died years ago, and part of the reason why he ran away from home was because he kind of seen something he shouldn't. And as a kid, his mother was telling him always these stories about the Merrick and the Cassis. And the Cassis are basically these demons that got locked away in this prison because they were killing people and eating them or jumping into their bodies. It was interesting. And then the Merrick are like the good guys, and they were the ones who imprisoned these Cassis. And now the Cassis have come back to seek revenge and to kill off all the Merrick. Well, Ian is reluctant to believe any of this, but I think he kind of wants to believe it so that he can believe in his family again because he's so isolated from them. And Molly kind of breaks down his walls, and she has her own story to tell, and it's really good. I enjoyed it. It was very intriguing. It kept you going. It was action packed. There's a lot of, I don't want to say high, well, yeah, actually there are a lot of high stakes in here, and it's just really good. It's something that I think you'll pick up and not be able to put down, and I think that's one of the things I look for a lot of times in paranormal or fantasy kind of books is ones that'll suck you into their world, and I really enjoyed this for that aspect. And the series itself is just really good. It follows his siblings because Ian's not an only child. He has a brother and a sister, and then it follows like the people in this other world that they meet along the way. So, okay, we're not even halfway done. So I moved you guys in a little bit closer because I felt like that was really far away. But anyway, next I have Slave Dispensation by Nalini Singh, which is the first book in her Psy Changeling series, which once again is one of my favorite series of all time. And this one follows Lucas and Sasha. Now Sasha in this world is a Psy, and Psys are people with some kind of mental ability. So you have telekinetics, telepaths, empaths, that kind of thing. And so she is a empath, I believe. And the interesting part about that is because Psy are supposed to no longer be able to feel. So Sasha kind of goes against the grain completely because that is what her ability is to feel and to feel other people as well. So she is kind of isolated in this little home by her mother so that other people don't realize that she is not unfeeling, because if they realize that, then they would send her in to be rehabilitated and her mind would basically just become like a vegetable. So she's very isolated, and she ends up meeting Lucas, who is the alpha of the Dark River Pack, and the Dark River Pack is a leopard pack. And he is very distrustful of her because Psy are part of the reason why he lost his parents, and he doesn't want to let one into his pack to possibly hurt them or harm him, and he's very closed off. And Sasha, in her very sensitive, like kind feeling way, kind of worms her way into his heart, and it's a love story. It's really sweet. I really enjoyed it. This is not my favorite one in the series. I have a few. My very favorite one is Kiss of Snow, which is, I don't want to tell you whose story it is, but I think it's like book 9 or something like that. But this one is really good, and I've reread it multiple times. I reread through the series multiple times, and this is still definitely one of my favorite ones, like I said, of all. And speaking of favorite series of all time, I have A Hunger Like No Other by Cressley Cole, and this is the first book in the Immortals After Dark series. And the Immortals After Dark is one of the most expansive paranormal fantasy type worlds that I've read, where it covers a wide range of creatures and species and worlds, and it's very, very, very expansive. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy most about it, is that it's a wide variety. There's nothing that you can't read one book and it's exactly the same as another book, and I think that is why it's so enjoyable. But anyway, like I said, this is the first one, and this one follows Lachlan and Emma. And Emma is a Valkyrie, but not. She's a Valkyrie plus a little bit more. And she is very shy, she's very timid, and she's used to being taken care of by all of her aunts, who are Valkyrie. And they're all these super strong, super badass women. And she is just trying to figure out who she is in this world. And then you have Lachlan, who is a shifter who has been lost for a long time. He's been imprisoned, and he ends up, like, I believe he ends up like chewing his leg off or something, because he sends Emma and he sends that she's his mate, and so to get free he like chews his leg off and takes her prisoner. I love this series, I think, the most because it's so funny. I think the comedic humor in between all of the very serious moments is what makes it so good. And I encourage anybody who likes paranormal to read these, because they are so engrossing and so lighthearted, but also serious at the same time. Give it a try, and you probably like it as well. Here is the Breed series by Laura Lee, and this series follows shifters of different kinds who were genetically created, and these shifters have decided they no longer want to work for the scientists who created them, and so they break out of their prisons, and now they're trying to prove their human rights to the government. And so in this one is book 2 technically. It follows Shara and Kane, and Kane is a human soldier who helped to break the shifters out of these prisons. And Shara is his mate, but she doesn't want to be his mate because she feels like he abandoned her. And he doesn't understand why she's so upset, because he doesn't believe he abandoned her. He thought she just disappeared, and he wasn't even sure she was alive anymore because the lab that she was in blew up. And so when he finally does see her again, he's shocked and hurt that she never came and found him. And so it's very heartbreaking when you hear about their story, because there's a lot of things that went into why she did what she did, or why he did what he did. And it's completely miscommunication, but it's also like torture and people lying to them and telling them things, and it's a lot. And you kind of see in this series the treachery, because it's not only enemies coming from the outside, it's also enemies coming from the inside. Because you would think that the people who have been there with you, have seen you tortured and mutilated and brutally assaulted or imprisoned, you would think that these people would want to help you and be there for you, but they quickly find out that not everybody is trustful in their world, and it's very high stakes and very much them figuring out that if they want something done, they have to kind of depend on themselves to get it done. But I do love the first books in the series. I will say, like, halfway through the series, that's about where I fell out of love with the series, and it just became like a series. But the first books are fantastic, and they are some of my favorites. So give it a try. You might not feel the same way as I do, but there's that. Alright, so the next book is a recent read, and it is a fantasy that is very dense, it's very complicated, but I really loved it. And that is Gods and Monsters by Jane Marie. And this one follows a woman named Jane. And Jane feels very depressed. She's unhappy with her life. She feels like she can't really achieve anything. And then the plague kind of hits not the United States, hits the whole world. And this plague takes and it turns people into zombies. And these zombies obviously zombies are eating people and killing people. So after this plague hits the world, Jane is just trying to figure out how she can help and protect her family, and she decides that the way she's going to do that is by going out and getting supplies and endangering herself. She has twin children, a boy and a girl, and she also has her husband, and she leaves them every few days to run out and get supplies. Sorry if you can hear my dog yawning. I don't know what that was, but she was yawning. But anyway, so every few days she runs out, she gets supplies for them, and kind of endangers herself in the process. And on one of these runs, she runs into this group of soldiers, and the soldiers basically save her life, but she doesn't really understand why she's drawn to one of them. And then she feels very guilty because she ends up getting infected, and when she's drawn to this one soldier, she's thinking about, wow, I have a husband, why do I want him so badly? And then the soldier, his name is David, and he is a part of this group of vampires. And there's a whole prophecy going on about Jane and David, and there's like gods and werewolves, and it's so complicated. And then it's all based in like King Arthur theory, Arthurian, but let me just say that's right. It's based in like Arthurian, like history and myth type stuff, and it's a lot going on because they're getting played with and kind of toyed with by gods and angels, and it's complicated, but it's good. It's not a huge book, but for not being a huge book, it's very thick and it's very dense, and it did take me a couple of days to read it. Not because, like I said, it's not a long book. It's only 360 something pages. It's just very, there's a lot going on in here. And as I was reading this, I was talking to my brother and I was telling him about it, and he's like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to explain. And it is. It's a lot to take in. And I do want to continue with the series. It's like a trilogy. And I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed everything about it. It's just a lot going on, so just know that going in. It is definitely fantasy with a lot of layers. But I liked it, and it was action-packed. There was always something going on the next page, and I loved that. So just keep in mind. So next is one that I also haven't read in a very long time, and it's one that's very out of character for me. I don't read a ton of historicals. I don't read a ton of historicals at all. But this is one historical that I enjoyed a long time ago. And when I thought about doing this was one that I wanted to mention because I did really enjoy it. And that is Eternal Highlander by Lindsay Sands and Hannah Howe. And this one follows a group of, well, a family, two families, I should say, rather, of vampire Scotsmen. So this particular book follows Connell and I forgot what the other one's name is. Connell and Cathal, and they are part of the McNaughton and McIllich families, and their families are dying out basically because they have inbred so much, their families are starting to die out. And so Connell and Cathal take it upon themselves to decide they need outsiders, fresh blood into these families. And so they find women to do that for them. Well, I thought that would be something different to mention because I don't read a lot of historicals anymore. So we are coming to the end of this, and hopefully we can get through these quickly. So there's a few more. Okay, so the next one I have is Gentlemen Prefer Succubi by Jill Miles, and this is the first book in the Succubus Diaries, and this one follows Jackie Collins, I think her name is, Jackie Brighton, there you go. And Jackie Brighton wakes up one morning in a dumpster, basically, and she has to remember how she ended up in that dumpster, and so she kind of backtracks her day, and in this world, you can't sleep with a vampire. No. Yeah. You can't sleep with a vampire and an angel in the same time span. Otherwise, you turn into a succubus. And that is what happened to Jackie. She slept with an angel. And then she had an affair with a vampire. It wasn't planned. She ends up getting attacked. And then the vampire Zane ends up saving her and leaving her, and she figures out she's a succubus. It's very funny. There's a lot of banter in here. You do get a lot of like Jackie's internal thought, and I just found it really funny. It almost reminds me of kind of like Bridget Jones's Diary, but make it succubus, if that makes sense. And she is kind of grappling with this angel and this vampire and who she wants to be with, and they want her to choose and choose them. So it's hilarious. I found it so funny. So the next two are kind of like not standalones, but they can be standalones if you choose to pick them up that way. So I wanted to put in at least a couple standalones, and I realized I don't really have many because most of them are series when I read them. But so the first one I picked up was Sex and the Single Vampire by Katie McAllister. Now the cover doesn't look like this anymore. She did change the cover, but I got this so long ago. I got this in 2009. There you go. So it was a long time ago. So this one follows Allegra, who is a summoner, which means she can see ghosts. And she like interacts with them. She can kind of like send them on their way if she has to. And Christian, who is a dark one, and dark ones are basically vampires, and they're kind of in this world constantly looking for their mate because their mate is like the other half of their soul. And Christian is a very down on his luck dark one because he thought he found his mate, he was sure, and his mate ended up being in love with someone else. And so he thinks he's going to spend the rest of his life alone. He's never going to find a new mate because his one is gone. And then he runs into Allegra, who is not anything like he thought she would be. She is very sassy and funky, and she does not want any business with this dark one mating crap. She doesn't really want to hear about it. She doesn't believe she's his mate. It takes a lot of convincing for them to even figure it out. And I love this story. And one of the biggest things I enjoy about it is the ghost. Okay. Because she has pet ghosts and they follow her wherever she goes, and they all have their own opinions and thoughts. I love that aspect of it. And I also loved the banter of the two main characters back and forth and how they kind of play off of one another, and I really enjoy that. So, like I said, this is a series, but you can read them individually and it won't hurt. I have read some of the other books in the series. I haven't read all of them, but it's not necessary to read all of them. So, and then the other one that I thought would be a good standalone is Her Vampire Husband by Michelle Hoff. Now, this one follows Blue and Creed. And Creed and Blue are being arranged in a marriage as a way of creating a peace between werewolves and vampires. But Blue is very reluctant. She obviously doesn't want to marry a vampire. She already had a boyfriend. She thought that would be who her mate would be, who she would be married to, until her father tells her, no, this is what you're going to do, and you have no choice. And along the way, she kind of grows feelings for Creed. He grows feelings for her, and she realizes that the people in her life who she thought loved her may not have really loved her as much as she thought. And Creed, who is this outside person looking in, is really the best choice for her, and I really love that aspect of this. They really fight their attraction for each other, and then they kind of realize that maybe it's not so bad being with someone so different from who you are. Now we've reached the end, the last book. This is the final book I have for this, and that is one of the books I read last year, and that is Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa, and this is the first book in the Bargainer series. And this book follows Callie, and Callie is a siren, and she had something happen in her past, and so she ended up calling on the Bargainer to kind of fix her problem. And the Bargainer, he makes deals with people, obviously, the Bargainer. So every time he makes a deal with Callie, he gives her a bead. And these beads are stuck to her arm and she can't get rid of them. And Callie, over time, has accrued a whole armful of these beads. And then all of a sudden, the Bargainer disappears. And he doesn't come back for 7 years, I think. And then all of a sudden, he appears again. And he is wanting to collect on all of these deals. With this, there is a whole overarching plot, and it does span across 3.5 books. I think 3.5 books. Because I know there's like a novella, and then I think there's 3 full-length books. But the story itself is fantastic, and I can't wait to read more in the series. I actually plan to read more this month in the series, so we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, so that is the last book I have for you guys. Okay, we are finished. That took a lot longer than I thought it would. It took almost an hour to get everything ready. That was a lot of books. I didn't plan on doing that many books, but it just kind of happened. I'm not mad that it happened though, so I hope you guys enjoy this. As usual, I will leave all the books linked down below, and give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in my next video, hopefully very soon. Bye guys.